Now, according to a study conducted in America, children aged between 11 and 15 who were taught to just avoid having sex altogether were less likely to go on to have intercourse than those taught about safe sex. The study of 600 children found that half of those taught about safe sex went on to have underage sex, as opposed to only a third who were taught abstinence. Now, this is only one small study, but do we feel that teaching children to just say no before the age of 16 is the right approach?
Well, I think we're generalising again. I think there's a lot of kids out there who that is the last thing on their minds. I think it's just like there's certain types of adults, there's certain types of children who are just fascinated with it, but there's other kids who would rather read a good book. I think we shouldn't be... Please let kids be kids. We're teaching them far too much, far too early. The peer pressure is absolutely unbelievable for any kids now. And I get very uncomfortable because I was one of the kids that never thought about it because I was told it's against the law until you're 16. So that's just what I believed, and I didn't think about it until I was 16. And I know there's a lot of kids that are out there doing it, but I tell you something as well. If a girl at my school got pregnant, the shame of it was absolutely unbelievable.
In my school, lots of girls were pregnant. I remember sitting in my doing my GCSEs and looking around me, and there were a lot of bumps in the room.
Really?
Yeah, it was quite commonplace. So I think, you know, and I was of that generation where we had the whole AIDS and HIV, and so really safe sex had to be on our agenda at school, and we were taught safe sex.
Well, if you taught to say no, there won't be as many bumps in your classroom.
You say that, Jane, and that's really... I mean, I get what you say. I wasn't one of those girls that wanted to have, you know, sex underage. I wanted to save myself for a relationship, and that was me. My best friends could have been totally different in their attitude, and some of them were. But I went to Africa a couple of years ago, and everywhere you go in Africa, I mean, and this is the third world where HIV is out of control, and they really need to kind of sustain not only the population, but sexual diseases, transmittable diseases like HIV. And because all of their work is funded by charities, and a lot of that charity money comes from churches, rather than preaching safe sex and saying condoms, kids, everywhere you go, there's posters that say abstinence. And let me tell you, it doesn't work.
No, that's the problem.
They're still going to have sex because, especially in those countries, what else is there for them to do? They can't go to the cinema. They don't have the same lives that we live. They're so far removed. Sex is about all there is that's free and fun, and they do it.
In this country, we're telling them too much. And that's why there is that much sex going on.
We're not telling them, love, because I speak as a mum of teenagers here. The information is just out there. It's on the internet, it's in the papers, it's in books. They can find every bit of information you can dream of at the click of a switch. And I think there's a big difference between information, though, and education. I think what kids do need are some guidelines, some strong guidelines. And I think, really, we need to teach both. Because I agree with you, there are kids who don't want to have sex, who do want to stay. I don't think it's the majority, but they do want to wait. And they should be supported in that view. They should feel if that's what they want to do, then that's absolutely fine. But for the majority of kids who I think are very interested in sex, and at an ever earlier age, I think we have to teach them how to be safe, how to not get pregnant, how to not get diseased. And I just think you can't have enough education as opposed to information, and I think there's a difference there.
I think Jane's... I think the world you live in, I think that's wonderful, but I don't think we live in that world anymore, sadly. And I think when you see 5- and 6-year-olds on mobiles, you know, and 7-year-olds on the internet, I think that tells you the story where we are now. And it's terribly sad, and I'd love it to be the world that you live in, but we don't live in that world now. We live in this very real world that is very frightening. And, I mean, my daughter's 25, and if she came to me with a question, I would answer it. Now, I would... put it in a way that it wasn't too blatant, but I would actually answer the question, because if I didn't, she'd go what I used to call behind the bike sheds and get another answer which probably wasn't as nice. And so I do think these days, and I did with Keely, I protected her, and she's grown up very sensible, but I think these days it's about protecting them against diseases and letting them know what's out there. I don't think we have any choice.
But don't you think, Sherrie, that mother and daughter thing is a different thing? If you're in a school school and in a classroom and a teacher is telling you that sex is OK as long as you do this, then the peer pressure from the rest of the girls and the rest of the boys is far too much for anybody to take.
I agree, and I think peer pressure is one of the worst possible things. But I have to say there are kids at home who have parents who don't care, who couldn't care less whether they exist. And so where are they going to get it? The only place left is school. Now, if they're in school, they're not saying to them, you can have sex, anybody.
No,
they're not saying that. They're saying, if you do, you have to protect yourself.
What about you shouldn't do it till you're 16?
Yes, I agree with you, but they're going to do it anyway.
Get mad now.
I tell you what.
What about relationships?
Best way to put a kid off sex, let a teacher talk to him about it. That'll desexualise it, let me tell you. OK, it's competition.